The throne room of the Valanthi Empire stretched before Daniel like an ocean of light and crystal. He had studied pictures of this place for years, but nothing had prepared him for standing inside it. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top, soft white wisps drifting between pillars of carved stone. The floor was made of glass, and beneath it, living gardens grew in impossible colors. Every step felt like walking on air. Thousands of Valanthi nobles filled the hall, standing in perfect rows according to their rank and family. They wore robes that shifted colors with their moods, and right now, most of those robes showed shades of pale yellow. Daniel had studied enough to know this meant amusement. They found him funny. He kept walking, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Katie walked one step behind him, as tradition demanded. The walk from the door to the throne was nearly a quarter-mile long. The Valanthi had designed it this way on purpose. They wanted visitors to feel the weight of every step, to understand just how small they were in this ancient empire. At the far end of the hall, raised on a platform of pure white crystal, sat the throne, and on the throne sat Queen Lyrethis Vorkon. She was young. That was the first thing Daniel noticed. By Valanthi standards, 26 was barely past childhood. Their species lived for 500 years or more, and most rulers did not take the throne until they were at least 200. But Lyrethis had claimed her crown early, through a combination of brilliant politics and ruthless determination that had shocked even her own people. Her skin was silver like all Valanthi, but hers seemed to shine brighter than the others. Her 4 eyes were the color of deep space, black with tiny points of light that might have been stars. She wore a gown made of woven light, literally woven from captured sunbeams by artists who had spent their entire lives learning the craft. On her head sat a crown of living crystal that grew and shifted constantly, responding to her thoughts. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, and cold in a way that made the room feel like winter. Daniel stopped at the proper distance, exactly 15 steps from the base of the platform. He performed the formal bow, bending at the waist while touching his right hand to his heart. He held the position for exactly 3 seconds before rising. "Your Radiant Majesty," he said in flawless Valanthi. "I am Daniel Carter, Ambassador of Earth. I bring greetings from the people of my world, and gratitude for the honor of standing in your presence." The Queen's eyes moved over him slowly, examining him like a collector examining an insect. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, then painful. Daniel stood perfectly still. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was like music, soft and clear, but there was no warmth in it. "So," she said, "this is a human." She rose from her throne and descended the steps. Her movements were fluid, almost floating. Every Valanthi in the room held their breath as their queen approached the strange visitor from the young planet. She walked in a circle around Daniel, studying him from every angle. He felt her eyes on his skin, his clothes, his hair. He felt her judgment with every step she took. "Smaller than I expected," she said, "and so fragile-looking. Is it true that your species can die from something as simple as a fall?" "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy, Your Majesty," Daniel replied carefully. "But we are determined." "Determined," she said the word as if tasting it, then rejected it, with a small shake of her head. "The fly is determined when it beats against the window. The worm is determined when it crawls through dirt. Determination without power is merely stubbornness." Some of the nobles laughed at this. The Queen allowed herself a small smile. "Tell me, Ambassador, why have you come to my empire? What could possibly make you think we would have any interest in your little world?" Daniel had prepared for this question. He had written and rewritten his answer 100 times during the journey here. Your Majesty, Earth faces a crisis. Our planet is sick, and we have found a way to heal it. But the cure requires a mineral called crystalline 7, which exists in abundance only here on Volanthi Prime. We come to propose a trade. Fair exchange between our peoples. A trade, the Queen repeated. And what could humanity possibly offer us? What do you have that we could not make better ourselves? We offer our medical advances. Human doctors have developed treatments for diseases that affect many species across the galaxy. We offer our agricultural sciences, which have allowed us to grow food in conditions that were once thought impossible. We offer our art, our music, our stories, and we offer friendship, Your Majesty, an alliance between our peoples that could benefit both. The Queen stopped in front of him. She was tall, even for a Volanthi, and she looked down at him with those star-filled eyes. Friendship, she said softly. You speak of friendship. Yes, Your Majesty. Tell me, Ambassador Carter, do you know how many species have stood where you stand now? Do you know how many have come to this throne room begging for our help? I am not here to beg, Your Majesty. I am here to propose a partnership of equals. The throne room erupted in laughter. Even the guards, trained to show no emotion, could not hide their amusement. The Queen herself laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Equals, she said. Oh, that is precious. That is truly precious. She turned and walked back toward her throne, still laughing. When she reached the platform, she turned to face him again. Let me explain something to you, little human. When my ancestors were building the first starships, yours were learning to bang rocks together. When we were exploring the galaxy, mapping stars, creating art that will last forever, your people were killing each other with sticks and stones. We have 40,000 years of civilization. You have barely 10,000 years of scratching in the dirt. She sat down on her throne and leaned forward. There is no equality here, Ambassador. There never will be. You are children playing at being adults, and you do not even know it. His face showed nothing, though inside his heart was pounding. Your Majesty, he said quietly, we are a young species, this is true. We have made many mistakes, and we have much to learn. But youth is not a crime, and age alone does not create wisdom. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Are you lecturing me, human? I am simply observing that every species was young once, even the Volanthi, and I wonder, Your Majesty, if your ancestors would have wanted to be judged by their earliest stumbles rather than their potential for growth. The throne room fell silent. No one spoke to the Queen this way. No one dared. Queen Lyrithis stared at the human ambassador for a long moment. Something flickered in her eyes, something that might have been anger or might have been interest. You have spirit, she said finally. I will grant you that. Spirit and stupidity often look the same from the outside. She settled back in her throne. Very well, Ambassador. You have asked for a trade. Now let me tell you exactly what I think of humanity and what your species is truly worth. And with those words, everything changed. Queen Lyrithis rose from her throne once more. This time, she moved with purpose, each step a statement. The nobles around the room leaned forward, sensing that something important was about to happen. Entertainment was rare in the eternal courts of Volanthi Prime, and watching a young queen humiliate an alien ambassador promised to be memorable. She descended the steps slowly, her gown of woven light trailing behind her like a river of sunshine. When she reached the floor, she did not circle Daniel this time. Instead, she walked straight toward him and stopped just 2 feet away, close enough that he could smell the strange perfume she wore. Something like flowers that had never grown on Earth. You want to know what humanity is worth? She asked, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive room. Very well, let me educate you. She raised one slender hand and gestured. A section of the glass floor beneath them became dark, then lit up with images. Daniel looked down and saw Earth, his home, spinning slowly in the blackness of space. "Your planet," the Queen said. "We have studied it for quite some time. We have watched your species develop. We have observed your history. And do you know what we have concluded?" Daniel kept his eyes on his home planet. "I would be interested to hear your Majesty's thoughts." "I am sure you would." The Queen waved her hand, and the images changed. Now the floor showed scenes of human history, images that made Daniel's stomach turn. War, destruction, cities burning, bodies piled in fields, mushroom clouds rising over devastated landscapes. "This is what humanity does," the Queen said. "You kill each other. You destroy each other. You fight over imaginary lines drawn on maps. You slaughter millions because they worship different gods, or have different colored skin, or speak different languages. In just the last 100 years of your history, you have killed more of your own kind than most species kill in 10,000 years." The images kept changing. Pollution choking the skies, forests burned to ash, rivers running black with poison, animals dying by the millions as their homes disappeared. "And you do not stop with killing each other," the Queen continued. "You destroy everything around you as well. Your planet is dying because you poisoned it. Your animals are vanishing because you took their homes. Your own children grow sick because you filled the air with your waste. And now you come to us, asking for help to fix what you have broken." Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to defend his species, but he forced himself to remain silent. This was not the time. The Queen leaned closer, her 4 eyes fixed on his too. "I have studied your literature, Ambassador, your stories. Do you know what I found? Violence. Endless violence. Your heroes are warriors. Your legends are battles. Your children play games where they pretend to kill each other. Violence is woven into the very fabric of your culture." "Your Majesty," Daniel said carefully, "we are not perfect, but we have also created great beauty. Our art, our music, our poetry. Beauty built on graves," the Queen said. "Every great monument in your history was built by slaves or paid for with blood. Your museums are filled with treasures stolen from conquered peoples. Even your music, your precious music, grew from the suffering of the oppressed." She stepped back and spread her arms wide, addressing the entire court. "This is humanity," she announced, "a species of violent children who cannot stop hurting each other long enough to notice they are destroying themselves. They have come to us begging for help, and what do they offer in return? Technology we mastered 30,000 years ago, medicine that works only on their fragile bodies, art created by blood-stained hands." Laughter rippled through the court again. The Queen smiled, clearly enjoying herself. "But the truly amusing part," she continued, turning back to Daniel, "is that they actually believe they matter. They believe their little planet, their brief existence, has meaning. They believe they are equal to species that were ancient when their world was still cooling from its creation." She walked slowly around him again, but this time her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow reached every ear in the room. "Let me tell you what I see when I look at you, Ambassador Carter. I see a species that will be dead within 1,000 years. Your planet is failing, and even if we gave you all the crystalline 7 you wanted, you would find new ways to destroy yourselves. It is in your nature. You cannot help it." Daniel's hands tightened behind his back, but his face remained calm. "I see animals," the Queen continued. "Clever animals? Yes. Animals that learn to use tools and build machines. But animals nonetheless. You have no true culture, only imitations of culture. You have no wisdom, only the illusion of wisdom. You pretend to be civilized, but underneath you are still the same savage creatures that crawled out of your planet's mud. millions of years ago. She stopped directly in front of him and lowered her voice even further. You are nothing, Ambassador. Your species is nothing. In the grand history of the galaxy, humanity will be a footnote, a brief curiosity that appeared and vanished in the blink of a cosmic eye. 1,000 years from now, no one will remember your name. No one will remember Earth. No one will care that you ever existed. The throne room was completely silent now. Even the nobles had stopped laughing. The queen's words hung in the air like poison. She leaned even closer, her face inches from his, and delivered her final blow. You know what you are, human. You are a pet. A clever little pet who has wandered away from home and does not understand that it is lost. You do not belong among the stars. You do not belong in this room. You do not belong in my presence. You are beneath me. You are beneath everyone in this court. You are beneath the lowest servant who cleans the floors of this palace. She straightened up and smiled coldly. Now, you came here to beg for scraps from our table. So beg. Get on your knees, admit that humanity is worthless, and perhaps I will consider giving you what you need. Perhaps I will throw a bone to the pet. Every eye in the throne room fixed on Daniel Carter. The nobles waited eagerly for the human to kneel, to grovel, to confirm everything their queen had said about his species. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Daniel stood completely still. His face showed nothing. No anger, no shame, no fear. Just quiet, thoughtful consideration. Katie Morgan, standing behind him, held her breath. She had known Daniel for 5 years. She had never seen anyone push him this far. The queen raised an eyebrow. Well, I am waiting. Surely you did not come all this way to leave empty-handed. Think of your dying planet. Think of your 8 billion people. Their survival depends on you. So kneel, human. Kneel and beg. Seconds passed. Then more seconds. Daniel took a slow breath. And then he did something that no visitor to the Volanthi throne room had ever done in 40,000 years of recorded history. Daniel Carter did not run. He did not storm away in anger. He simply turned his back on the queen of the Volanthi Empire and began walking toward the distant doors. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Each step sounded like thunder in a room that had forgotten how to breathe. Katie Morgan fell into step beside him, without hesitation, matching his pace perfectly. The throne room seemed to freeze. Thousands of nobles stood motionless, their color-shifting robes turning gray with shock. No one had ever walked away from a Volanthi monarch. It was not done. It was not possible. Yet here was this small, fragile human doing exactly that. Queen Lyrathis stood where Daniel had left her, her 4 eyes wide with disbelief. For perhaps the first time in her life, she did not know what to say. The silence stretched for 5 heartbeats, then 10. Finally she found her voice. Ambassador. Her tone was sharp, commanding, the voice of absolute authority. I have not dismissed you. Daniel kept walking. His pace did not change. His shoulders did not tense. He simply continued toward the doors, as if he had not heard her. The queen took a step forward, then stopped herself. Queens did not chase after visitors. Queens did not pursue those who had been given the honor of their presence. But no one had ever simply left before. The rules did not account for this. You cannot simply leave, she said, and there was something new in her voice now. Not anger, not yet. Something closer to confusion, perhaps even uncertainty. This is my throne room. This is my empire. No one leaves my presence without permission. Daniel reached the halfway point of the massive hall. He did not look back. The nobles began to whisper among themselves. What was happening? What should they do? Some looked to the guards, expecting them to stop the human. But the guards had no orders, and without orders they could not act. This is an insult, the queen said, her voice rising now. This is an insult to the throne, to the empire, to the Volanthi people. You will face consequences for this. Your planet will face consequences." Still, Daniel walked. Katie walked beside him. Their footsteps were the only sound in the enormous room. Queen Lyrithis felt something she had not felt since she was a child learning at her tutor's feet. She felt the loss of control. She had crafted this entire scene perfectly. She had planned every word, every gesture, every humiliation. The human was supposed to kneel. He was supposed to beg. He was supposed to prove that humanity was exactly as worthless as she had said. Instead, he was leaving. She raised her hand to signal the guards, then lowered it. If she had him stopped by force, she would look weak. If she had him dragged back, she would look desperate. The human had trapped her without saying a word. Every option left her looking less than she was. Minister Vorath stepped forward from the crowd of nobles. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "shall I order the guards to bar the doors?" The queen considered this for a moment that lasted an eternity. Then she shook her head slowly. "No," she said, "let him go." Daniel reached the great doors. They were 50 feet tall and weighed more than some Earth buildings. 2 guards stood on either side, their faces showing the same shock that filled the rest of the room. They looked at their queen, waiting for instructions. None came. Daniel placed both hands on the doors and pushed. They were designed to be opened by servants using mechanical assistance. A human should not have been able to move them at all. But Daniel pushed, and the doors began to open. Perhaps it was the lighter gravity of Volanthi Prime. Perhaps it was something else. Something that had nothing to do with physics. Whatever the cause, the doors swung open wide enough for Daniel and Katie to pass through. They stepped through the gap without looking back. The doors swung closed behind them with a sound like the ending of a story. And then they were gone. The throne room erupted. Nobles shouted at each other, demanding explanations, demanding action. Some called for the human to be arrested. Some called for war. Some simply stood in silence, still trying to process what they had witnessed. Queen Lyrithis remained motionless on the floor where Daniel had left her. Her mind raced through 40,000 years of Volanthi history, searching for a precedent, searching for guidance. She found nothing. In all that time, in all those countless audiences, with representatives from thousands of species, no one had ever simply walked away. Some had argued, some had wept, but every single one of them had wanted something badly enough to endure whatever treatment the Volanthi chose to give them. This human had wanted his planet's survival. 8 billion lives hung in the balance, and he had still walked away. What kind of species did that? What kind of people valued their dignity more than their existence? Minister Vorath approached the queen carefully. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "what are your orders?" She did not respond at first. She was still staring at the closed doors, replaying the scene in her mind. The human's face had shown nothing. No anger, no hatred, no fear, no shame. Just a calm, quiet acceptance. He had listened to every insult, absorbed every attack, and then made his choice. And his choice had been silence. No defense, no argument, no pleading, just silence and departure. It was the most powerful statement Queen Lyrithis had ever witnessed. She had tried to prove that humanity was worthless. Instead, this single human had proven that humanity could not be bought, could not be broken, could not be made to betray itself for any price. "Your Majesty," Vorath pressed. The queen finally looked at him. Her face was unreadable. "Clear the throne room," she said. "I wish to be alone." The nobles filed out slowly, still buzzing with shock and speculation. They would talk about this day for centuries. They would argue about what it meant for centuries more. When the last of them had gone, Queen Lyrithis climbed back to her throne and sat down heavily. She stared at the doors where the human had disappeared, and for the first time in her short reign, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The human had come seeking friendship. He had offered fair trade and mutual respect. And she had responded with cruelty, with insults, with demands for submission. She had expected him to break. Instead, he had shown her something she had never seen before. He had shown her what human dignity looked like. And despite everything she had said, despite all her careful arguments about human worthlessness, she found that she could not look away from it. In the silence of the empty throne room, the young queen sat alone with her thoughts. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that the galaxy had just changed, and she did not yet understand how. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours of Daniel Carter's departure from the Volanthi throne room, every civilized species in known space had heard some version of the story. By the end of the first day, there were 100 different versions being told. By the end of the first week, it had become legend. The human who walked away from the queen. Some called it madness. Some called it suicide. The Volanthi Empire was the oldest and most powerful civilization in the galaxy. No species in 40,000 years had dared to offend them so directly. The humans, many predicted, would face terrible consequences. Their planet would be left to die. Perhaps the Volanthi would even destroy them entirely. But other species saw something different in the story. They saw a young species, desperate and dying, who had been offered survival at the price of their dignity. And they saw that young species say no, not through clever negotiation, not through threats or tricks or games, just through the simple act of refusing to accept humiliation. Daniel Carter and Katie Morgan traveled back to Earth in silence. The 14-month journey gave Daniel plenty of time to think about what he had done. He had condemned his planet. He had thrown away humanity's only chance. 8 billion people would suffer because he had been too proud to kneel. But every time he considered this, he came back to the same conclusion. If humanity survived by abandoning everything that made them human, then what exactly would survive? A species of slaves with human faces? A collection of broken spirits who had sold their souls for another generation of existence? That was not survival. That was just a slower kind of death. When they finally reached Earth, Daniel expected to be arrested. He expected to be tried for crimes against humanity. He had doomed his world. Instead, he found crowds waiting for him. The story had reached Earth long before he did. People knew what had happened in the Volanthi throne room. They knew what the Queen had said. They knew what Daniel had done. And they were proud. For the first time in decades, humans from every nation stood together. They did not care about borders or politics or the old hatreds that had divided them for so long. They cared about one thing only. One of their own had stood before the most powerful monarch in the galaxy and refused to be treated as less than human. Daniel walked through the crowds in a daze. People reached out to touch him, to thank him, to shake his hand. They wept, they cheered, they chanted his name. He felt like a man who had done the only thing he could do, and was now watching the consequences unfold beyond his control. 3 months later, the first messages began arriving from other species. The Drothians, a reptilian race from the Outer Rim, sent word that they wished to open trade negotiations with Earth. They had crystalline 7. Not as much as the Volanthi, but enough. They had never approached humanity before, considering them too young and too violent. But the story of Daniel Carter had changed their minds. Any species that valued dignity over survival, they reasoned, might be worth knowing. The Kelani came next, offering agricultural technology that could help heal Earth's damaged soil. Then the Vormesh, with medical knowledge that could extend human lifespans by decades. Then a dozen more species, then 24, then more than anyone could count. All of them told the same story. They had heard about the human who walked away. They had been impressed. They wanted to meet these strange, proud creatures who refused to kneel even when their world was dying. Within a year, humanity had more allies than any species their age had ever achieved. Trade agreements were signed. Technologies were exchanged. The Crystalline Seven arrived in quantities that exceeded Earth's wildest hopes. The planet began to heal. And in the grand palace of Volanthi Prime, Queen Lyrathis watched it all happening. Her advisors brought her reports every day. This species had allied with humans. That species had opened trade. A coalition was forming, centered on Earth, that was beginning to rival Volanthi influence in certain sectors. Some of her advisors urged action. The humans should be punished. Their allies should be threatened. The growing coalition should be crushed before it became a real threat. But the Queen refused. She had learned something in her throne room that day, something that her 40,000 years of inherited wisdom had not taught her. She had learned that power was not the same as strength. She had spent her whole life believing that the Volanthi were superior because they were old and powerful. She had mocked humans for their youth and weakness. And then a single human with nothing but his dignity had defeated her completely. He had not argued. He had not fought. He had simply shown her that there were things more important than survival, and that he would not compromise on them. In doing so, he had revealed a strength that the Volanthi had lost somewhere in their 40,000 years of dominance. The strength to say no. The strength to walk away. The strength to choose death over dishonor. It was a kind of strength that could not be conquered. 18 months after Daniel's departure, the Queen sent a message to Earth. It was brief and formal, requesting the opportunity to discuss terms for trade and alliance. Daniel received the message while meeting with representatives from a species called the WordHFY. He read it once, set it aside, and continued his conversation. He responded 3 weeks later. The Queen waited. She had never waited for anyone in her life, but she waited now, and when the human's response finally came, she accepted the delay without complaint. Negotiations began. They were long and difficult. The Queen found herself dealing with humans as equals, something she had sworn she would never do. But she did it anyway, because the alternative was watching humanity grow stronger, while the Volanthi stood alone. 5 years later, the Volanthi Empire and the people of Earth signed a treaty of friendship and mutual defense. It was the first such treaty the Volanthi had ever signed with any species. At the signing ceremony, Queen Lyrathis found herself standing next to Daniel Carter. He was older now, his hair touched with gray, but his eyes were the same as they had been that day in her throne room. Calm, quiet, certain. She surprised herself by speaking to him directly. "I have thought about that day many times," she said quietly. "I'd have asked myself why you did what you did. You could have knelt. You could have saved your planet years of suffering. Why did you choose pride over survival?" Daniel considered the question for a long moment. Because survival without dignity is not really living. And because I believed that humanity was worth more than you thought we were. I believed that if I showed you who we really are, you would eventually see it for yourself. He smiled slightly. I was right. The Queen nodded slowly. In her 4 eyes, something that might have been respect flickered briefly. "Yes," she said, "you were." And in that moment, standing on the bridge between 2 civilizations, Daniel Carter understood that his silent walk across the Volanthi throne room had changed not just Earth's future, but the future of the entire galaxy. Sometimes the loudest statement is the one made without words. Sometimes the greatest victory is the one won without fighting. And sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is simply turn around and walk away. The ship came out of faster-than-light travel with a soft hum, and Daniel Carter pressed his face against the viewing window like a child seeing snow for the first time. But this was no snow. This was Valanthi Prime, the heart of the oldest empire in the known galaxy, and it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The planet glowed with soft purple and blue colors. 3 moons hung in the sky like silver coins. Cities made of crystal spread across the surface, catching the light of twin suns and sending it back in a million different directions. Even from orbit, Daniel could see the Grand Palace, a structure so large it was visible from space. "Quite a view," said Katie Morgan, stepping up beside him. She was his aide, his translator, and his only friend on this 14-month journey across the stars. She was a small woman with red hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Daniel nodded slowly. 40,000 years of civilization built that. 40,000 years while we were still learning to make fire. Katie put a hand on his shoulder. And yet here we are, standing at their door. That has to count for something. Daniel wished he could believe that. Back on Earth, 8 billion people were waiting for news. Their planet was dying. The soil was poisoned. The water was running out. And the air in the big cities had become dangerous to breathe. Scientists had found a solution, a way to heal the Earth. But it required a rare mineral called crystalline 7. And crystalline 7 existed in large amounts on only one planet in the entire galaxy, Valanthi Prime. The Valanthi Empire had watched humanity stumble into space travel 50 years ago. They had observed humans like scientists observe bacteria in a dish. Interesting, perhaps, but not important. Certainly not equal. Daniel had spent 5 years preparing for this mission. He had learned the Valanthi language until he could speak it better than most Valanthi. He had studied their customs, their history, their art, their religion. He had memorized 10,000 years of royal bloodlines. He knew which hand to use when accepting a drink, which eye to look at when speaking to a noble, and exactly how many degrees to bow when meeting the queen. He had done everything right. He had sacrificed everything for this mission. His marriage had ended because his wife could not wait 14 months for him to come home. His father had died while he was in transit, and he had not been there to say goodbye. He had given up his entire life for this one chance to save his world. And now, looking at the impossible beauty of Valanthi Prime, he felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The ship began its descent through the atmosphere. Valanthi Flight Control guided them down with cold efficiency, directing them to a landing pad on the outskirts of the capital city. As they dropped through the clouds, Daniel got his first close look at Valanthi architecture. Every building was a work of art. Towers twisted toward the sky in shapes that should not have been possible. Bridges made of pure light connected floating platforms. Gardens grew on vertical walls, filled with plants in colors that did not exist on Earth. And everywhere, there was crystal. Crystal streets, crystal fountains, crystal statues of ancient heroes. The Valanthi themselves walked these streets with the easy confidence of a species that had never known true challenge. They were tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within. They had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces, and their movements were graceful, in a way that made humans look clumsy by comparison. The ship touched down with barely a bump. Daniel took a deep breath and stood up straight. He was wearing his best suit, dark blue with a small Earth flag on the chest. It was the finest clothing humanity could produce, but he knew it would look like rags compared to Valanthi fashion. "Ready?" Katie asked. "No," Daniel admitted. "But that does not matter. Let us go." The ramp lowered, and they stepped out onto Valanthi Prime. The air smelled sweet, like honey and flowers. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth, making Daniel feel like he might float away at any moment. A small group of Valanthi officials waited for them, their faces showing polite disinterest. The leader of the group stepped forward. He was old by Valanthi standards. His silver skin faded to a dull gray. He wore robes covered in tiny crystals that chimed softly when he moved. "Ambassador Carter," he said in perfect English, "I am Minister Vorath. I will escort you to the palace." Daniel performed the traditional greeting, touching his right hand to his forehead, and then extending it, palm up. "Minister Vorath, the people of Earth thank you for this welcome." Vorath's 4 eyes blinked in surprise. Most aliens did not bother learning Volanthi customs. The minister recovered quickly and returned the gesture. "You have studied our ways," he said. "Interesting." They walked through the city toward the palace. Volanthi citizens stopped to stare at the strange creatures from the young planet. Some pointed, some laughed. Children ran up close to look at them before being pulled away by embarrassed parents. Daniel kept his head high and his pace steady. He had been warned about this. Humans were a curiosity here. He could not let their amusement bother him. The grand palace grew larger with every step. Up close it was even more impressive than it had seemed from orbit. The main structure was carved from a single piece of crystal the size of a mountain. It had taken 3,000 years to complete, and another 2,000 years to decorate. Every surface was covered with images of Volanthi history, their greatest moments preserved forever in stone and light. At the palace gates, guards in golden armor scanned them with devices Daniel did not recognize. They were searched thoroughly, but respectfully. Their communicators were taken away. Their small recording devices were confiscated. "Her Majesty does not allow outside technology in the throne room," Vorath explained. "You understand." Daniel understood. They wanted him to feel small and alone in the heart of their power. It was working. The doors of the throne room stood before them, 50 feet tall and covered in gems that sparkled like stars. Vorath gestured for them to wait. "Her Majesty will summon you when she is ready," he said. "It may be some time." Daniel nodded and took his position. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his breathing slow and controlled. Katie stood beside him, equally still. They waited for 6 hours. No food was offered, no water, no chairs, just 2 humans standing in a hallway, while Volanthi nobles walked past, some snickering, some ignoring them completely. When the doors finally opened, Daniel's legs were shaking, and his throat was dry. He had come too far to show weakness now. He stepped forward into the throne room to meet Queen Lyrathis Vorkhan, the young ruler of the oldest empire in the galaxy. And everything he had prepared for was about to be tested.